Hi, my name's Umber Gori and welcome to the Living with Disability discussion here at Manchester Pride Conference. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and we're talking about disability today. So in terms of disability, I have PCOS, endometriosis, TMJ, migraines, chronic fatigue, some chronic, more invisible disabilities.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Living with a Disability conversation. I am Asifa Lahore. I'm commonly known as Britain's first out Muslim drag queen. My pronouns are her, hers, she, and I have been living with a disability since the age of 11. I am severely sight impaired. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which means that I have essentially less than 40% vision. It's great to be here with you today talking about disability, Umber. I find that, in the LGBTQ plus community, I find that disability is kind of swept underneath the carpet or isn't really talked about. And, our experiences, I think, as queer people living with disabilities is very different to other people living with disability.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. And I think with me and you, we've known of each other, I think, for a few years, and I never knew that you had a sight impairment. You probably had no idea about my health issues either. So it's also sometimes hard to know if there's any people with disabilities in a space. And also our communities, a lot focuses around nightlife and the kind of spaces or even protest, spaces that aren't as accessible as most spaces, I would say, for me anyway.
No, definitely. I mean, I agree with you on that one, especially when it comes to nightlife. I mean, my eyesight has got progressively worse because of my condition since being diagnosed as a teenager. And my first few experiences on kind of like the nightlife in the queer scene in London were linked to my disability in a way, because when I go into darker or dimly lit spaces, I can't see very well. And in a community that is very much, I see the queer community is very, very vain. We like what's on top. We like, what we see. We like, it's a very image-based community. And, I'm not ashamed to say that. I don't think that's a bad thing. But for someone whose disability literally affects their sight, and during the nighttime in dimly lit areas where you can't really see who's in front of you and you can only recognize people by their smell or the shape of the shadow, essentially, it was really difficult. And it still can be difficult, especially like when I'm performing or having those conversations in nightlife. It has got better for me because in the sense that I think as I've grown as a person, as I've grown in confidence in regards to who I am, I've become much more accepting of my own disability and also accepting of coming out as disabled. I don't want to assume anything regarding like your ethnicity or your cultural or religious background, but I'm from a British Pakistani Muslim background, and I think people just, when they see disabled, they think wheelchair, they think, someone who's physically disabled. But the reality is, like, my disability, it affects me. However, it was the last thing I felt I had to come out about or deal with because I had so many other things to deal with before, as in coming out as Muslim, as South Asian, Pakistan, dealing with all of that before I could even deal with the disability aspect.
No, I'm also British Pakistani, also Muslim. So we have a lot in common. That's probably why, because you were one of the first people I knew of that was an out British Muslim and Pakistani too. I was like, wow, I had no idea about there being a Muslim drag queen. So I agree. There was a lot of dealing with those different aspects of my, and then burying the disability stuff because it's the easiest thing for me to hide out of all of those. You know, you can't hide being brown. That you can't hide so many aspects of who you are. But something I think a lot of, especially people that are labeled like feminine, deal with is people pleasing. So kind of like sacrificing your own energy for other people, not wanting to be like an inconvenience or draw too much attention in a negative way. You know, wanting to like look pretty, be happy for other people to feel comfortable. And I think the process of coming out as disabled has been a lot about me accepting that I'm never going to fulfill certain expectations of who I am, because I'll have to say, I can't physically do the thing you want me to do. I can't give you what you want. And I think that's very hard for a lot of people to admit. They can't do as much for other people because they have to look after themselves more. Like me, being disabled takes up so much of my time. I have to remember when I've taken, you know, how many hours since I took my meds. I have to remember appointments and prescriptions so much. There's so much. It's like a full-time job, just taking care of my disabilities. So I think that's what the coming out was for me, as well as the whole perception of what disability looks like and the age of it as well, because I'm 29. So I think a lot of people, including doctors, are quite surprised that I'm not healthy 100% because I look healthy. But one thing that maybe might come up more in the conversation as well, my conditions have caused weight gain for me. And in the community that we're in, like you said, we're so image focused. And in my industry as a makeup artist, everything's very image focused. And I also, it's almost like you have to humble yourself quite a lot when you realize you're disabled, because you're like, I can't control what my body does. You know, there's only so I can really control it. So it's definitely a process. And I don't think, you know, I'm ever at the end of it. You know, it's always happening because you meet new people and you have to always come out.
Yes.
I don't know if you ever find that to people. I'm sure it happens to you with your site where people assume your abilities and then you have to awkwardly maybe say like, okay, I actually can't see that, what you're talking about.
Most definitely. So because my sight loss, in the sense that, you know, I can go about my daily activities, right? I can go, I can walk about, I can go shopping, I can do all sorts of things. But my sight loss limits me in the sense that, say, for example, I'm going to the train station. I will need help in terms of knowing what train is coming to what station, at what platform, and at what time, and how I get there. And that sounds really weird in the sense that, you know, say if I go to my local station, which is East Croydon Station in London, I'll see the billboards. I won't be able to read the billboards. So the best way I describe it is I can't see the finer things in life. So, for example, when I'm in, I'm very conscious that obviously this conversation is quite based on our queerness. And so I'm going to talk about like my disability in queer spaces on purpose to start with. I think, you know, when I go, for example, say if I'm going on a night out, I'm going to a bar, I'm going to a club, I'm having a boogie with my friends. I feel safe with my friends because they know about my disability. They know how to maneuver around me. But say, for example, I'm having a conversation with someone new, whether it's a friend, whether I'm trying to pull someone, whether they're trying to pull me, it can be very difficult, like, you know, because disability for me, it's not something that I naturally talk about. It's like, oh, I'm blind, or I'm, you know, registered severely sight disabled. And they will be like, well, you're moving around, you're dancing, you seem happy. Well, how does it affect you? Or, you know, you get asked awkward questions like, well, you know, are you wearing contacts? Yes. So why can't you see? And, you know, it's hard to explain to people in those settings that glasses or contact lenses won't give you 100% sight, or that laser surgery can't sort out your genetic disorder. And having been a person who has gone through the queer experience of having those conversations with people in queer spaces around religion and culture, for example, or reconciling or not reconciling the two, now to have this conversation about disability, it can be so draining, because there's times when I feel like, God, do I have to have another bloody conversation about another obstacle to get over, if you like? And, oddly enough, I find this one quite difficult. I'm not going to deny it. In a queer space, I find it really difficult because, the images we see out there in our magazines, in our spaces, the thing about our community is that it can be so picture perfect, in the sense that, the images that are put into our queer scene magazines, or, what's out there on the internet, I feel that everything about being queer is so picture perfect, be who you are, look how you want to look. And that's cool. I can paint a pretty face, I can put on pretty hair, and I can look picture perfect. But my disability doesn't make me picture perfect, if that makes sense. It's not that I feel held back by my disability at all. I find it hard to explain to people, especially newer people. And whether I'm out there performing or whether I'm out there, going out on a night out, the last thing I want to do is talk about my disability.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. The way I get around it with performing is, if I'm performing like during the day at well-lit spaces out in the open, God, I can see the audience, and that's cool. But say if I'm in a cabaret venue with you can only literally see the first people in front of you, I just imagine that there's audiences there, and I can hear the clapping and whatnot, and that's how I get through it. But again, I've learned these skills, right? I feel as disabled people, we learn skills that get us through queer spaces. And sometimes I feel we shouldn't have those skills, but we learn to kind of deal with those skills. How do you sort of navigate the queer community with your disabilities?
I think that's such a good point, honestly, because I thought about this when we got into lockdown, how many people with disabilities have actually already navigated this kind of situation in the past of being isolated, because I don't think there's anything I felt more isolated by than trying to fit myself into a space and feel like I belong there, whether that's because I'm Muslim, disabled, brown, too feminine, not feminine enough. There's all these things that I'm always trying to fit into a picture of who I am. And I think a lot of us in this day and age are kind of it's not our fault, but we're obsessed with what image we put across. And it's interesting because I work in that industry, I'm part of making those picture perfect pictures. But it feels strange at the same time, because I know everything behind that, and what is so not glamorous about the lives that queer people live are not glamorous at all. But especially if you have a disability and those skills that you're talking about, I definitely think that I come across as someone who has their shit together. Am I allowed to say shit? I don't know.
Of course, I think you are.
That's even more like code switching, being a good little Muslim and then being like shit and talking about, all of that. But I'm just like,
I think you can say much more worse things than shit, honey, so it's fine.
I actually do, but I think what you reminded me of in terms of being queer and disabled, you reminded me of doctor's appointments more, because I don't actually go out dancing and stuff that much because of my physical, the physical aspects of my disability make that quite difficult to do on a regular basis. Oftentimes it comes up because my endometriosis and PCOS affect my ovaries, uterus, and some of the surrounding organs. So often they'll say, are you using contraception? And I'm like, no. Are you in a relationship? Yes. Well, then why are you worried about getting pregnant? No. So no matter which
Mm.
I see, I could be sometimes, it's A&E and you don't know what kind of person your doctor is,
Mm.
or whatever it is. You don't know if they're going to feel comfortable with you after you disclose that you're queer.
And there's so many dimensions to that. I mean, not just as a queer person, but also as a South Asian Pakistani person. Take, sexuality off. If you were heterosexual, then that's a whole conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, often if it's like a man who's South Asian, they're going to assume that because I'm not married, I'm not sexually active, but they do ask me. And sometimes I say no because I know what they're talking about, and I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not getting pregnant. And sometimes I'll just say, I'm not doing anything that could get me pregnant. And they'll be like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't really feel like I should have to disclose this kind of thing to new people I meet all the time. And I think that's what's able, is it takes some of your, like you were saying, it doesn't hold you back. And sometimes I'm like, people think this is holding me back, but it's not. And other times I think people think that I'm fine, but I'm not fine. Because I'm quite a closed person. I'm not naturally out there talking about my sex life or whatever. Even, like if I am in pain, I don't like to talk about it. I just like to say, okay, I'm going to head home now,
Yeah.
So it's hard because it makes you have to be vulnerable and honest about things that you don't necessarily think you would be if you weren't disabled. So I'm being forced to talk about this all the time. Like I can't hide my queerness if I want to feel safe as much as I could if I didn't have to talk about my vagina all the time, That's probably with your eyes though still, I don't know.
No, I was just thinking, because there's a lot in that I really relate to. I really relate to, believe it or not, weight gain, not because of my disability, but so I'm transgender and I obviously take HRTs. So just during lockdown, for example, like not having the exercise routines and going, I'm complaining about going from I'm wearing a size 8 dress right now. The zip is totally open because I think I've gone to a size 10 and I'm worried, and I'm just like, why am I worrying about going from a size 8 to 10? So there's that always in place, because obviously as a public performing artist, you're always kind of worrying about that. And then the other thing that came up for me as you were talking was, around my disability, I find it difficult to ask for help. Because, and I think that's more to do with with the culture that we're born in. Disability is seen as, especially in the South Asian context, I think disability is seen as a hindrance. It's seen as a curse. It's seen as, especially if you're a woman, if I take on my South Asian hat, no one would want to marry you. No, you're not seen as a 100% woman, if you like, if you've got all these disabilities attached to you. So growing up with that psyche, I think, again, it's building up that skill set that we shouldn't have to be our inner soldier or our inner hero. And I'll be honest with you, Amber, it's only been in the last, I posted a YouTube video about my retinitis pigmentosa. It may have been like 2-3 years ago. And it's literally been in the last 2-3 years where I've allowed myself to go, do you know what? Yes, I'm disabled. What comes with that? Let me register with the local authority as severely sighted, because it was something that I just refused to do for ages. And, learning about getting training around canes, around using canes, using guide dogs, and even though I don't need them, I got the training as a form of acceptance, as a form of really owning my disability, if you like. Things like applying for PIP, applying for DLA, applying for a blue badge, even though I don't drive or never will be able to drive. Just small things that have allowed me to go, do you know what, this is me, and I'm slowly asking for help. I'm slowly going, do you know what, there are different there's requirements that I need in order to live and in order to work. So for example, for this Zoom conversation, I have a support worker now in place that can help with setting it all up. You know, Manchester Pride, when they got in touch, I did say, look, I'm severely sighted. I need certain things in place in terms of navigating the Zoom call. So I've got to a point now where I'm slowly asking for help that I need. I still find it difficult, like so difficult, because I still have that Asian hat on that says, you know, I'm not good enough and I'll never be able to be a success or whatever. I won't be 100%, you know, because it's a hindrance, it's a curse. And then, or in some cases, oh my gosh, you know, not only are you queer, you're also disabled as well. So you deserve it, you know, in an Asian context, it's horrible. But it's letting go of all of that and asking for the help and support you need.
I think that's a very powerful statement, because asking for help, I think when you find out or you start understanding that you have special needs, whatever it is, or you have a disability, you're like, okay, I need to just take care of these things myself and hide them, and I don't want to embarrass myself. And I would even get embarrassed asking my own family members to help me with small things. Because you start feeling like you're selfish or rude or whatever, because you're so used to being the helper. You know,
yes.
My elders and younger people in my family, everyone. I think we all, as Pakistanis, especially feminine people, are like put in this position of you need to take care of other people. And even when I say things out loud, I need this or I want this, it feels wrong to be saying. I was even just saying earlier, I hate that my mum has to help me with things sometimes, because I'm after her. I'm at that age now. And it just feels culturally wrong. But then I try and always reach out to those places in my head where I know other disabled people have got this amazing wisdom, and they've said, you know, taught me things like the fact that we all have special needs, but disabled people's needs have not been. So we're not like a burden, we're not catered to by the mainstream world that we live in, and it's not our fault, and that needs to change. It's not a personal our fault thing. That's really helpful for me, because I realize even in, you know, the relationships with my partner, my family, every person has their own needs, even when they're not disabled, and you have to adjust to the person you're with. And I try and remember that I'm worth that as well, that other people can do. It's definitely so hard to ask for help, because I want to be easygoing. That's what I want to be. But you're like, I can't be easygoing all the time. I have to plan everything. I have to, like you said about the trains, I can't plan working 2 days in a row outside my house. Obviously, COVID, it's happening less now. But, you know, before I couldn't do 2 photo shoots 2 days in a row. And then you obviously get anxiety that people will perceive you as lazy, or they won't think you're serious about your career. There's so much that comes with being honest about being disabled. Things that are taken away from you just from opening your mouth, you know?
I'm guessing that sort of, you know, going through the motions of explaining that to people, you know, especially around your work, that probably adds to the fatigue as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like an admin job, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you do for self-care?
Honestly, I do a lot. I go to acupuncture. I don't set alarms for sleeping unless I really have to. I do a lot of things to make sure my body and muscles are relaxed unless I need to be like really active, like at work. So I'll prepare myself and have plenty of rest. I've kind of got my methods down for what I need when I know I'm going to have a busy day or two. I know how to prepare for it, and I also know what the days after are going to look like, and I prepare for that too. What about you? What do you do to look after yourself?
What do I do? So I Sleep's a big thing for me. I do think sleep is so underrated, and I really hope that the pandemic has made people realize the importance of sleep as well. And sleep, good food, and good films. Those three things really help me. Like if I could just be under a duvet in a onesie on the couch, eating something and watching something, that's like my biggest thing. Like I always call it me time, or a sifa time, if you like. And it's just a way of, if my cup is like getting empty, it's just a way of refilling it to the top again. That's really one way of doing it. Another thing, okay, it's going to sound really silly, but I love gossiping with my mum about other relatives. It really, I'll call her and be like, so is anything hot off the press? And we'll just natter about stuff. I have a very interesting relationship with my mum. And it's really weird because I'm 37 now, and I used to hate, my mum. It's not like she's the village gossiper in any way, but me and my sister nicknamed her the gossip, basically, of the town. And it's interesting how now that I'm older, that's the one thing I really love about her. So that's another thing that I do. Sometimes I might just put on some music and just have a good old boogie around the house and do a good old lip sync session and pretend I'm, Celine Dion or Mariah Carey or whatever, and just go for it. That helps a lot. And sometimes just being creative, whether that's songwriting in my studio, whether that's playing around with chords and melodies. Expression I find is really, really important for self-care.
I actually I do the same thing with my partner. We watch a lot of Drag Race, and we're very into like drag culture and ballroom and stuff. And my partner loves music and dancing, so I've gotten more into it. And that's one way that I've been able to move my body that feels good for me. And it's not like I'm physically exhausting myself for the sake of work or someone else. It's just for me. So so even when it's just silly little dances, nothing even strenuous or very impressive, I love to have a little dance. And that's where I think clubbing and stuff like that comes in. It's such a big part of being queer, I think, discovering nightlife, and that's how you queers and other disabled queers even. So, and you asked me how I'm, if I meet other people with disabilities who are queer, and I think that we meet each other all the time, because me and you met each other a few times and we didn't know that the other person was disabled. And I think that often is what's going on, is that we don't actually know that there are so many disabled queer people. I wish it could just be a little bit more normalized to talk about, because everybody, like I said, everybody has needs. And we're realizing, a lot of queer people are disabled physically, but also have a lot of mental illness problems associated with the isolation and rejection and violence of being LGBTQ+. Those experiences can often traumatize us into having a disability. I actually am a survivor of trauma, and I have complex PTSD, and that's also another aspect of my disabilities. And that's really hard as well, because places like bars and clubs can be triggering for a lot of survivors of trauma, as well as people who maybe need to sit down more, maybe need more light to see better, things like that. So it's hard, because how do you have a club still be a club, like kind of environment, while still adjusting it for people's needs? And I think I wrote an article about this quite a while ago over Pride season at one point. And one of the things I'll say is disability is only considered when a disabled person asks for it to be considered. And often we are made to feel like we're ruining things for everyone else. So I think that it would just be a shift in the way people consider accessibility, in terms of reaching out and saying, what are people's needs? Instead of saying, just that, drop an email if you have any questions, is not really, a lot of us don't have the confidence to say, you need to make this space accessible for me. Instead, we'll just say, I'm going to stay home because I don't want to cause a stir. So I think that organisers and people in the industry really need to think about what are simple things like having more seating, not assuming that people aren't disabled, making sure that disabled toilets are available and you're not questioning who's going into them. There's a lot of that I think needs to shift in the culture of nightlife. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, as you were talking about the nightlife, I was thinking of a parallel. And the only parallel that sort of came to me was this idea of a disabled person taking a train journey. And there is for example, a wheelchair user can get in contact with National Rail and say that they're, as disabled people, we always pre-plan. So they pre-plan their journey with National Rail. They always have someone not really escorting them, but making sure that they know what carriage they're getting into, making sure there's certain ramp access, and everything is all pre-planned. And I feel that, if a sort of mechanism could be arranged either by bars, nightlives, conferences, whatever, where things can be sort of pre-arranged or pre-planned in a sense to make things just more accessible. This idea of meeting other queer people, I'll be honest, again, in the nightlife and in the bars and everything, it never happens because I think the idea is just to have a good time and party. And secondly, I'm always worrying about tripping over or, getting someone's name wrong or not recognizing anyone. My big thing, especially at the start when I first started performing in drag, if somebody was in front of me and I couldn't see them or recognize them, they would get really offended. And that became a huge, people, as queer people, we're very what's the word? Not paranoid, but we're sensitive people. We're sensitive souls, shall we say.
All narcissists, I think.
Exactly. So how dare she not talk to me? How dare she just walk past me? And it's just like, well, I couldn't see you. And it's, that was something also on me where the more and more honest I became about my disability, the more and more that sort of cleared up. So, but, if we could have some sort of mechanisms in place, that would be great, that we can also negotiate with, whether it's in groups, whether it's individually, that would be great. And having those open accesses in order to do that. And the other thing was, I wanted to mention 2 years ago, I was asked by Stonewall, they were doing sort of like youth projects and they were doing specific youth sort of residentials for people from ethnic minorities that were queer and also queer young disabled people. And I went to both residentials. And when I went to the queer young people's residential, it was mind-blowingly beautiful because not only did I make some great friends, I also realized that it's okay to have separate queer disabled spaces away from the nightlife, and I'm not talking support groups, I'm just talking places where we can just be, whether we have visible disabilities, whether we have hidden disabilities, we could just come together and be. I met deaf people. I met people, who were physically disabled who wanted to do drag and would never ask, their local drag artist or their local drag queen to help them with makeup, but they got in touch with me going, oh God, you're disabled, can you help us in any way? How do you do this? How do you do that? And that just humbled me, but also blew my mind in the sense that, sometimes I feel we look so much towards the nightlife, the bars, the clubs, that, I think with everyone's help, we can't do this on our own. But I do believe that why can't we create some sort of night space or day space for disabled queer people and their allies?
I mean, that sounds like a dream. I actually was thinking about this recently and I got kind of emotional because I was watching RuPaul's Drag Race, which honestly, I know I'm trash for watching it, but
oh no, you're not at all. I love it. I absolutely love it. And you're not alone. 10 million people watch it, honey.
No, I know. I get embarrassed sometimes, but you know, under quarantine, it's been so hard. So I picked it up and I watched the season where, spoiler, Evie Oddly wins, and she is disabled and has a progressive disability, somewhat like you, but more physical, where she has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I remember thinking when watching it, and obviously she's very young, and she was saying that she couldn't do some of the things that she was doing that really made her win. She wouldn't be able to do that at the time. And what will her performance look like when she needs to use crutches or then eventually a wheelchair? And I thought, like, how sad it is that the world is missing out on all of these amazing people simply because they need a wheelchair. You know, some of the best performers out there could be being completely are being completely overlooked because of their disabilities, or even invisible disabilities, where someone like me, who people might perceive that I'm not as hardworking because I'm more tired than other people, or need more brain, and we live in a hustle culture, so it's like you have to die and all of that. And I'm like, no, I will die. But I just thought, you know, I really want to discover, I don't want to sit around thinking that my disability is really only about me. It's actually a gateway to all this amazing world that I was unaware of before I knew that I was disabled, or that at all, because I knew that I wasn't well for a long time, but I didn't know I fit into a community. And I think it's such a good thing to take with you, that you're not alone, as isolating as disability is. But I think we have to be the leaders and kind of build what we need as well. And I think that organisers could really work on collaborating with more disabled people and realising then, if you give us a chance, your club night will sell out. You know, there are so many, there really are.
Yeah. I mean, a dream would be not only to have those spaces, but even within nightlife and day spaces, is to have, you know, these spaces that are much more disabled friendly and, you know, open to allies as well. I'm not saying it's just a separate space altogether, but just a space where, you know, it's just a bit more easily accessible, well lit, whatever, you know, however you want to have it. But, you know, I mean, we're queer people. We should be much more imaginative, I think, with our creative stances. I'm just glad we've had this conversation, because it's really invigorated me in terms of not only my personal journey with my disability, but the idea that, as you say, we are leaders and we need to continuously voice this aspect of being queer. And, you know, in many ways, kudos to Manchester Pride for actually having a conversation like this out there. I don't even think this would have happened 2-3 years ago. So, you know, there is movement.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important to mention, you know, both of us aren't visibly disabled. So that in this conversation, it's very specific to our experiences. And I don't want to overlook that I can walk down the street and people won't look at me as someone who's disabled. So that's also such a huge chunk of what people experience every day. And I think we just need to, it's something that I think our community is always trying to preach, but it's getting lost with the way that we're becoming more mainstream, maybe, is that individualistic and less of a community. So I think it's about bringing us back together, really, and not trying to be about an image for the rest of the world, but actually a space that benefits us.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think you literally have hit the nail on the hammer. Or is it hammer on the nail? Whatever. You know what I mean.
I get it. Thank you so much, Asfa, for chatting with me. It's honestly been such a great conversation to have. And I have so much respect for you, knowing more about you now.
Likewise. I've respected you for a long time. It's just we have never sat down together to talk about disability and all these other things that are intertwined with, you know, our disability and queerness. So thank you so much. And thank you for Manchester Pride for bringing us together.
Yeah, thank you to Manchester Pride. I hope that everyone watching has enjoyed the conference itself and this conversation has been helpful to you. You can also find both of us online, I think, if you have any further discussion that you want to have with us or anything like that. So I'm sure they'll include that in the information that you get.
Most definitely.